conversation. And I just want to rope in my guests. Of course, we have Ken Gishinga, who's from Mentoria, and Dr. Tobias Oluenyi, who's a lecturer on matters economics. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. But so let me get your initial sentiments first. Ken, I want to start with you. When you hear of a local assembly line for mobile phones, what comes to mind?
Many thanks, Jimmy. I think the aspiration of trying to create a manufacturing and assembly plant, I think it's a noble aspiration that can create jobs. I think this particular initiative is supposed to create about 150, 200 jobs. So I think the big story is a positive story. But I think also when you scratch on the surface, look at the features on this phone, it's a 2-megapixel phone for 7,500. It might struggle a bit in the marketplace. I think that might be the challenge. But I think the vision of building a manufacturing hub in Kenya, I think, is still quite positive.
All right, so Dr. when you hear about a missing link, and of course you have there the president, the cabinet secretary, and of course Peter Ndegwa, the CEO of one of the leading networks in East Africa, just talking about a missing link being the question of affordability. What do you think this is a step in the right direction? Do you think it's premature to celebrate?
Jimmy, this is a step in the right direction, especially the fact that we want to become digital with digitalized services and want everyone to access. So the question still remains on competitiveness, but it's a good step because when we start from here, then now we can improve on how we can compete well with the other producers because the market, Kenya is not going to be alone. As you know, China has the products ready and at whatever level that they are required.
All right, so Ken, one of the things that you actually touched on is the usability, the user-friendliness of these devices. And of course, the question that one wants to understand is, does it offer me the key applications or the key features that I wanted on a phone? Again, rightfully so, you've talked about 2 megapixels for the front camera, 5 megapixels for the back camera. So when you look at the population of Kenya, and again, we have been credited for having such a tech-savvy population, do you think this even scratches the surface in terms of us even just showing interest in some of these devices?
I think it will be a challenge, Jimmy. If you look at your typical millennial or your Gen Z, as you've said, this is somebody who's using WhatsApp, constantly on the Google Store, downloading apps, taking selfies from morning to evening. So it's a very, very active generation. The phone that is being put together in Athi River it's quite a basic phone. It's a 2 megapixel on the front camera and 5 on the back camera. Most cameras tend to go for much, much higher. So it might be a challenge to
be competing with for the same resources, for the same customers with the likes of Nokia, the likes of Samsung. So is this a phone that maybe you would even advise one of your students to get?
Jimmy, the market should be able to sort out itself by students who actually be able to have a look at this phone. And just as Ken is saying, you know the population we are talking about. So my student might find some challenge in terms of the the way they can take selfies, you know, the storage. So I think the fact that it will not, it requires a lot to meet the competitiveness. That is something to be relooked into. And again, when you talk of commercial viability, probably I think there needs to be, you know, I think there need to be market analysis, continuous market analysis to ensure that there is that viability.
All right, so Ken, one of the things that we've had the president in that clip that we've just watched talking about is this being an urgent priority. But is it though?
I don't think it's truly urgent. In fact, if you look at the statistics in terms of mobile phone penetration in Kenya, it's actually more than 100%, meaning that there are people who have actually more than one phone. So I didn't quite get that argument that it's linking a gap. I mean, I can't think of anybody today who doesn't have a mobile phone. So I think that argument is tenuous. But the idea that we are trying to put together manufacturing only takes 9% of the GDP. There's a long-term goal to take it to 15%. That needs to happen. I think they need to learn from lessons from history. If you remember in the administration under Daniel Arap Moi, there was a Nyayo Pioneer car in the early 90s. And indeed, it was a flagship car. I mean, it struggled to go more than 100 meters. And, people say, had we continued just improving on it, by today, 30 years later, we would have been the country that produces high-end vehicles. So I think there's still a story of persistence and what the Japanese call kaizen, just constant improvement that should not be lost in this story.
All right, and of course that's a good point that you bring out. But of course, Prof, one of the things that we really want to talk about is the question of consumerism. And from what we had there from Peter Ndegwa is the fact that they're coming up with a way of lipa mdogo mdogo. Now, we know this is something that has been tried in different markets. For instance, the US, it's big on this, where you just use your credit to purchase some of these devices and then you get to pay over time. When you look at this, what is the risk of some of these consumerism behaviors?
The challenge is that it will tie the incomes of people because when you have something to attend to, unalipa mdogo mdogo, you now have to divide in terms of what is it that you're going to consume, what is it you're going to pay. You are also going to have a challenge in terms of saving. What is it? Because whatever you are meant to save, bado unalipa mdogo mdogo the other side. So that is the challenge that is going to put on people. And that will actually mean that the people may need to work more so that they can be able to sustain the purchase of the same.
Yeah, so Prof, when you look at this business model, the pricing, I mean, we're talking 7,000 to 8,500 thereabout. So does it make sense?
Competitiveness, as we had said earlier, that price might require some revision. Because if you want it to penetrate, if you want to attract people, you actually need to lower that cost, especially when it comes to what we are seeing in the mobile market, particularly with what we get from outside. So that price might require some revision.
All right, so ideally, Ken, when such a big milestone is achieved, you would expect it to disrupt the market. Does this have the potential to disrupt the market in Kenya?
I don't think it will disrupt the market in the sense that young people might fall over themselves to go and buy it. But I think what it might do is it might create a story that Kenya is building phones in the same way that Rwanda has been putting together its phones. But you're right, it's really at the micro level, it might be a challenge, particularly with the younger segment that are very discerning. Jimmy, to the millennials and to Gen Z, even the social capital that comes with your phone is quite significant. The difference between getting a number from somebody you want can be highly anchored on the type of phone that you're saving that number. So there are some complexities there. But I think the reality is there's a narrative that Kenya is getting ready to be a manufacturing hub. And I think that's still a positive story that needs to be refined as we move forward.
All right, and we hope that taxation won't get in the way of that. But on that note, we want to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I mean, there has been a lot happening at the JKIA, and particularly with those new taxes and just people being forced to leave some of the things they're coming into the country with. So stay with us for that conversation. We take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more.